Some administrators and teachers might be worried that students would abuse this policy of retakes and do-overs. And there's some things you can put in place to make sure that doesn't happen. But think for a minute about this. Let's take the example of a student who meets all the deadlines. I mean, really, follows all the rules, and on Friday turns in his project. He worked his butt off. On Friday, he's buttless. Now imagine a kid who blew it off. Tempted by other things, whatever it was, he turns in something that's really close to garbage. He gets like a D or an F or a very low value score. But over the next 2 or 3 weeks, he keeps up with his sports and music and family and the curriculum of the rest of the classes he takes. But he has a bit of a life-transforming experience, and he actually goes back and he does the project properly. And he resubmits it, and he gets an A. What do you think the first student feels towards me as the teacher and towards a classmate? Resentment? Anger? None of it. It's 100% indifference. Because the kid who had a B and goes back and redoes the project to get an A only has a small step to take. B, B plus, A minus kids are allowed to redo things. How dare any teacher stand in the way of a child wanting to achieve excellence? He's got this small step. That other child had to go on with his life, all those pressures, and do the previous curriculum and the project. He wasn't getting a treat. He wasn't getting away with anything. There's no sense of, hey, that's not fair. They're totally like, wow, man, you should have used your time more wisely. And so we don't have that complaint. And there's hope in the equation. Kids raise their hands. They do assignments. They sit down in chairs. When teachers tell them to sit down, because there's hope. Not because of fear of things, because there's hope for me here. So we want to do that, but we don't want it to the students to walk all over us. So some of the things you can put in place, well, I would suggest that all retakes be done with 3 magic words: at teacher discretion. It's not to be taken for granted. So you send home your grading policies at the beginning of the year. Have parents and the students sign off that they have read and understood. Not read and agreed. That's beyond the purview of the parent. It's read and understood, those policies. So everybody knows that this is not something you just automatically get. It's situational, and I get to decide that. That's one protective sense. But also, kids have to submit to you a calendar of completion. For instance, if the redo is going to be done with all the other work, and let's say the redo is coming in on Friday, well, they actually have to map it out. Little squares on a piece of paper or a computer of some sort. What are you going to do on Wednesday so you do stuff on Thursday so you do stuff on Friday? You turn it in on Friday. Or maybe start with Monday, each step of the way. They have to also submit to you kind of a way they're going to relearn the material, and that can be outlined in the calendar. Like I've asked students, did you study for the test? Yeah. Well, what'd you do to study for the test? I read it. Well, then what'd you do? I looked away. How's it working for you? Probably isn't working very well. So that has to be relearning before there's reassessing. So usually at the beginning of the year and throughout the year, we make a list of at least 20, hopefully 25 or more, different ways to study for tests. And I need to see proof of this because whatever you did before wasn't working. So on the relearning portion, I need to see an outline of what are you going to do. 4 or 5 things pulled from that list. Most teachers can create that list with their students. Things like make flashcards, record things, have people test you, do a little 3x5 note card, all your notes on one side of a note card. When you encapsulate, you learn it better. All these great studying tools. Well, they create that list, they pull 4 from there, and you see the evidence of it, and then you can redo it. Now, what if the test is large and complex? It weaves together lots of content and skills. They're going to have to redo the whole thing. But if your test is compartmentalized, and they did really well in this one section, but it's only this one other section they did poorly, let them just redo that one section. Everything else is banked. They don't have to redo it. This ends up meaning that sometimes my retakes, my do-overs, are just a 7-minute interview back at my desk while the rest of the class is working on something. It wasn't something where I had to move heaven and earth and design a whole new test in order to actually do the redo. Now, there are some tests I would need to redo all over. Remember, there's 2 types of tests, and this will help you. There's forced choice, and there's constructed response. Forced choice is like true, false, matching, multiple choice. The kids choose from what you gave them. Well, if that was the retest, the kid might come in just memorizing an answer pattern. He might come in that day for the redo, dabba 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 dabba, CCC, dabba dabba dabba, CCC. Oh, give me the test before I forget the pattern. Learning is a little fragile there. So reserve the right to give a different format. I tell all my kids that. It's in my policies. I might use a different format, and it might be actually more complex and more demanding of you. Whereas before it was multiple choice, now it's cold, off the top of your head, explain it all. There's no prompting from me. And that gets into constructed response, like run the mile or compare two pieces of poetry in light of these categories. You're supposed to know that stuff ahead of time, and you went back for the redo and actually learned the stuff. I still win as your teacher. You learned the stuff just like you should have the first time, so I can actually give the exact same prompt the second time around because you're supposed to learn that thing, whatever it was. I also have kids write letters to me. What did you do differently between the first attempt and this subsequent attempt? And how are you different as a learner? What did you learn about yourself as a learner? Sometimes I write that letter to parents as well. There are a lot of hoops through which they jump, and they realize it's just easier if I keep up and don't have to do redos, which is exactly what good scholars do. One thing I do to protect myself is I don't allow any redos or do-overs the last week of the marking period, because that's when I'm just kind of going crazy with report cards and closing things down. It's just too nutso. So if it's a 9-week period, 8 weeks I allow these redos, and that last week, no, I don't do that. Why is that? It's just me, me, me. I'm trying to protect me and my family. But you know, if I ever go to a kid and say no redos, I actually have said those 3 things I said were unacceptable. It's okay if you don't learn this. This assignment had no value, and you didn't do it, so now you're off the hook. Turns out when I do that, that's a bitter pill to swallow. So some weeks later, I usually approach the kid and say, all right, how about going back and relearning this stuff? And I'll give you full credit. You see, the truth is it doesn't matter when in an entire school year a child learns something. He learns it this week, 3 weeks, 3 months later. What matters is that he learns it. And if you hold a kid accountable for learning this one thing this week, or this one day is the only day you have to demonstrate mastery, you're hiding behind the factory model of schooling that doesn't work. Some teachers will rationalize, well, they don't do this at upper grade levels, so we're not going to do it here, because we're trying to prepare them for the upper grade levels. What those teachers are really saying, whether it be high school teachers talking about college, career training, or military, whether it be middle school teachers talking about high school, elementary talking about middle, doesn't matter. What they're all saying is, these students are going to be exposed to inappropriate, miserable conditions later. So I'm going to make them miserable now so they're used to misery all along. This is not a tenable position by a highly accomplished professional educator. The thing that's going to best prepare them for college, or for high school, or for middle school, or whatever grade level it is above the level you teach, is if they know their stuff. And to not let them learn their stuff, to hold them accountable for this preposterous approach, this conveyor belt. You're 11, you learn this. You're 12, you learn this. Kind of approach to pedagogy we know doesn't work is actually reckless and irresponsible on our part. The best thing I can do for kids is to teach them well, to incorporate sound pedagogy. And I won't sacrifice any kid's instruction, his learning, just to protect some policy about retakes or redos. I'm going to have to step up to the plate.